that got us going. And again, to make a long story short, with the help of Lilly Endowment and Eli Lilly and Company and the March of Dimes, we put together a campaign for healthy babies. And I think that in addition, because so many people couldn't get to Wishart or wherever for that prenatal training, and so they just lay on their couch and ate potato chips and drank Cokes. And that's no way to do it. So we tried to get some mobile health clinics going out into the neighborhood, the so-called Mommobile. I believe in the decentralization of neighborhood health clinics and doing what you can out there to give people hope by giving them a service where they need it and where it's important. And you can do that somewhat through city planning if you're supported by the people who okay the budget, which isn't always the case, but it was always the case with Roselle, my friend. Wasn't it, Roselle?
Indianapolis has gone through a transition. You talked about dealing with leaders like a Herb Simon. Herb Simon's still here. But the banks, the utilities, institutions. And because of the economy, because of things that change, we don't have those local owners and local leaders like we had. How does a mayor, how does someone who's doing the role that you did work with this new form of leadership, because the cities are changing today?
Well, that's tough. And things are changing very much. For example, when I was mayor, basically we were thinking in terms of Marion County. Now we have to think in terms of a region. You know, and clusters have developed in biotech and life sciences and so forth that goes far beyond 96. And so you have to be willing to think regionally, and that's very hard to do for politicians who are saddled, if that's the right word, with 19th century jurisdictional baggage and want to protect their turf, whether it's a township or a county or something, and aren't willing to sacrifice in order to make the larger good possible. Well, that's not always true, but certainly in terms of vision, it's important now, more so than when I was mayor, to think regionally about economic development and about the delivery of services. And I think that's one way in which, as we move forward, we're going to have to develop a wider vision for the metropolitan area. Another one, obviously, is the decline of manufacturing as our economic base and the rise of life sciences and high tech and what's happening, say, with Roche out there on the north side of town.
Whose responsibility is it for that vision?
Sir, it's not just the mayor's. And that's what I meant by partnership. It's the responsibility of the leadership in the community, the nonprofit leadership, the for-profit leadership, and the governmental leadership, and I think the leadership that comes out of neighborhoods and stakeholders. There are really four legs on the partnership stool. Government, private sector, the nonprofits, and the stakeholders.
Yeah, but who's the shepherd?
The mayor has to be the shepherd, I think. And I have a certain philosophy of being mayor, which is proactive, not going like that to see which way the wind is blowing. And I'm not bragging on myself when I say that, it's just the way I feel. And there are a lot of people who disagreed with me. I wrote a book once called The Hudnut Years in Indianapolis, and I wrote half the book, and then I gave half the book to people who disagreed with me and let them write chapters and excoriate me for Unigov or for a lack of proper health policy or, I don't know, for race relations and so forth. But the point is that, from my point of view, the mayor was the orchestra leader, trying to get everyone to play in harmony with each other. And that means you've got to be proactive and grab some of these issues and try to deal with them, and not just hope they'll go away, and not just govern with a green eye shade mentality where all you're interested in is, you know, numbers and all that kind of stuff and budgets, and see the larger picture, which has to do with people and their problems.
But cities take resources, cities take money. Cities are long-term that came back to haunt you when you wanted to leave City Hall and go over to the State House.
Well, actually, the number was 27.
But that's a challenge today, and how do you get people to understand to invest in their city? Because
it's more of a challenge today than it was when I was there, because of the rise of a conservative mentality that says you can't raise taxes, period. And I did. And that 27 number, which came out in the newspaper, was used by my opponents. I mean, Beverly and I were walking in a parade out in a homecoming parade out in Terre Haute for Indiana State. And Beverly heard a little third grader, you know, TV had been plastered everywhere with this ad saying, you don't want hudnut for whatever it was I was running for state, Secretary of State. I mean, he raised taxes 27 times a day. Well, Beverly heard this little guy, third grader, tugging his mother by the sleeve saying, hey, look, Mom, there goes the guy that raised taxes 27 times in Indianapolis. You know, I knew right then I was going to lose the election. But you got to do what you think is right. And I felt it was right to do that in different ways. And Oliver Wendell Holmes said, taxes are the price we pay for civilization. And sometimes you're going to have to raise taxes. I think it's foolish at the national level to talk just about cutting and deregulating and everything. And this is a political statement, without also talking about revenue enhancements and figuring out, you know, where's the money going to come from? And right now, cities are squeezed all over the country, not just here, but all over the country. And we've got the local option income tax, and we've got a cap on the property tax. So where's the money going to come from? It's very, very difficult. People, I don't think, unless they've been in it, know how difficult it is in some ways to wrestle with these problems that you have in public life. I'm not answering your question, really.
Yes, you are. You're sharing your frustration, because I think everybody in any municipality sees it. You've got to invest in the future, but no one wants to pay.
Yeah.
How do you practice your faith? How do you live your public and private life today when really we are in this electronic petri dish and everybody can dissect you and have an opinion and say what they say even though they don't practice it themselves?
Well, I guess that's a good question. There again, there are different points of view. And I felt that your religious faith should be like, to use biblical metaphors, leaven in the bread, the salt in the meat. In other words, it's there, but you don't brag about it. It's not icing on the cake. It's not on your sleeve. Or put it this way, you can't legislate morality, and you shouldn't try. A Christian cobbler, said Karl Barth, is someone who makes good shoes, not Christian shoes. And of course, you get into moral issues and ethical issues, but I don't believe in parading religious faith as a badge of acceptability or the opposite. I don't care if two of the candidates that were running are Mormons, where they stand on the issues. When Jack Kennedy was the Sunday before election, I preached a sermon at my old church in Annapolis, Maryland. And I said, there may be a lot of reasons to vote for Kennedy or against Kennedy, but the fact that he's a Catholic, I don't think is one of them. And he's not going to put up a St. Mary in the White House shrine there in the White House. Have crucifixes on all the walls like they do at my university, Georgetown University. Somebody got up and walked out. They didn't like what I said. When I was preaching at Second Church, somebody got up and walked out the Sunday after Martin Luther King was killed. Dick, you were probably preaching about that time, and maybe on the same subject I did. I talked about, it was Palm Sunday, about Jesus riding into the city. I talked about Martin Luther King riding into the city, preaching the gospel of justice and all the rest of it. somebody got up and walked out. I had a nice talk with her afterwards, and she said, well, I just didn't want to hear what you had to say because Martin Luther King Jr. was a communist. And you got no business talking about communists from the pulpit, blah, blah, blah. In other words, I don't think you should wear your religion on a sleeve or make it the litmus test. But I do think it's there, and I think you have to act on the principles, the three principles that I was mentioning.
But what if someone else makes it a test or a way of judging you, and is that fair?
Well, I don't think it's fair, but if they do, and they judge me, and I'm not going to support you, fine. As the Bible says, you shake the dust from your shoes, and you go on to the next town. You're not going to please everybody all the time.
How about living your public life and private life in such a media intensity, and everything is going to be analyzed and picked apart for a public official?
You're absolutely right. This is very tough. And this is why a lot of people don't want to go into it. Maybe they don't want to show their income tax returns if they've got very high income. Maybe they don't want to have their private life exposed if they've been married twice before and done some philandering on the side. Maybe they don't want people to have the press pull these skeletons out of the closet. It is tough. I mean,
is that fair game?
Well, in a sense, I think it's fair game. I mean, if you're in politics, you have to accept the fact that there's going to be some of this. But, well, maybe you didn't see it, but Newt Gingrich last night thought it was very unfair the way John King came at him about his second wife and what she had said.
It was a great debating tactic.
Yeah. But do you want that in the President of the United States? Somebody who sort of flares like Newt does? I don't know. That's for the people who decide.
I prompted you enough. There's a microphone in the middle of the aisle, and I'd like to have anyone else come up here and let's have a conversation. Bill, who wants to ask the first question?
Roselle just left, bless his heart.
Come on up and, come on up. Don't be shy.
Microphone here.
Microphone's there. Belt it out.
Yeah, there's been a series of meetings going on all week for the Church Federation. I posed this question twice to two clergymen. I don't know if I really got an answer. It has to do with the state of education. And I quote here Thomas Sowell, who said, who grew up in Harlem in the late 40s. He said he got a good education then from those schools. He couldn't get it now. And we've heard about busing. We've heard about the billions that have been thrown at the schools, computers and all that. Yet, to quote David Hoppy in this week's Nouveau, in the end, speaking of education, it seems nothing has really worked. Read the papers. Listen to the news. Our schools are chronically failing, in crisis, letting us down. So my question is, with all of this energy thrown at these social problems, with all the billions, with all the busing, with all of this, why are the schools now being called for, especially for young black males, a pipeline to prison?
Well, that's a tough question. Some people in the room can probably answer that better than I can. But I regretted the fact that the mayor, at least when I was mayor, didn't have more of a say in education. There are some mayors who appoint to school boards. Rich Daley set that up in Chicago, and that might be one of the better ways to do it. I don't know. I have more responsible people, but even then, a few years ago, Andy Lacey was on the school board. He's one of our leaders.